Big 12 or go home. I'm Brandon Shanahan, joined as always by Midwest Broadcasting legend Drew Russell. Drew, it was a day yesterday. It was a day. Big 12's in trouble.
Not a good day either, Brandon Shanahan.
Yeah.
We were just talking about last week, how do we get the Big 12 to get 3 or 4 teams potentially into the college football playoff? Now I'm happy if we get 2, just based on how some results played out yesterday. Iowa State's loss, pretty much they've got to win out to make it. And Kansas State's loss, I mean, they still have a path, but I mean they have to win out one of those 2.
Yeah, I got to win the. And you also need some help to get into the Big 12 championship game, and then you have to win the Big 12 championship game.
Right,
that's their only path.
BYU still might make his net large, but they're going to have to go undefeated. I think that's how it's breaking down right now, Brandon.
I mean, without knowing that there's not going to be like an undefeated big SEC team, there's going to be maybe one undefeated Big 12 team. I still think 11 wins get you in, especially now that Clemson lost last week or last night. That's not nothing.
Yeah,
because now
I agree.
Because really, what you're hoping is that BYU wins out, Colorado wins out, Iowa State wins out. Kansas State is kind of cooked for this discussion. But if you get them to that point, it's like, well, you're really competing, taking a 10-2 Colorado and then a potentially 11 or 12 win Iowa State and BYU over 10-2 SEC teams, 10-2 Big Ten teams, and now like 11 win ACC teams. I still think the Big 12 has a path for 3, but they're going to need some help. If Miami would slip up one time before the end of the season, that'd be great. Boy, if Florida State could come through, that'd be awesome. Make kind of lock them in as a 1-bid league. Then that opens up the door. SEC teams are just stumbling all over each other. Texas A&M lost, so that's probably good for the agenda. LSU is very susceptible. They still play Alabama. I mean, one of those 2 teams is going to be out after this week.
Yep.
Texas hasn't looked. I mean, Texas will probably keep rolling, but if Texas A&M upends Texas, it's going to get very muddy before it gets clearer. But yeah, I think the best path for the Big 12 is Iowa State wins the Big 12 championship. They finished 12-1, which that feels like such a Nicky sentence to say. Iowa State 12-1, Big 12 champion, but that's where we're at. We're now into November and still on the table. BYU obviously wins out, plus that one lost to Iowa State in the Big 12 championship game. And then Colorado winning out, finishing 10-2. And they're probably better off not making the Big 12 championship game for this agenda.
Yeah.
I mean,
are we at the point, though, Brandon? I mean, are we at the point, though, that we're just like in loony land, like that we're just not thinking anymore? I mean, we can get multiple teams in, maybe, but I mean, I saw like the percentage index yesterday, like during the Baylor TCU game last night, of like Big 12 teams that can make the college football playoff percentage. BYU was over 50, and then Iowa State was the second closest. They were at like 20% or even under, like 19-18, and then K-State was like 15%. Like pretty much. I mean, we're looking at potential only 1-bid league, Brandon. Like, I mean, that's not impossible anymore, unfortunately.
No, but I think at the beginning of the season, you see 11 wins has to be the threshold. But just seeing the way that college football has unfolded, I mean, we got one undefeated, like 2 undefeated power teams left, 3 with Miami, Indiana, I guess. Okay, maybe not 3. But I think things are much muddier at this time than I think we could have expected, just everywhere throughout the country. And the Big 12, despite Iowa State getting upended last night, is still pretty pristine in that. I mean, they still got 2 teams that don't meet each other the rest of the season. And I mean, this might be the naive part, is I think 11 wins in the Big 4 conferences should get you in the wild card sense. And then I would take an 11-win Big 12 team over a 11-win Miami team if they
Right.
don't. I mean, the ACC looks very well. I bet there's an ACC podcast that's having the same exact conversation
Right.
about the Big 12, where it's like, well, I'd rather take a 2-loss ACC team, but I don't know. Maybe it is just our bubble, but I do think that there are murky waters. And kind of going into this and how you look at how the previous seasons have unfolded, 10 wins gets you in the conversation typically. 11 wins typically get you in. I think we're going to have a lot of 10-2 teams, so I don't think that's as safe of an area. But this is also 100% human calculation. Like the FPI that you brought up, or the percentage indexes, that's great. But like, these are just like college executives in a room. And assuming this does play out like that, where Iowa State's officially in, BYU has 12 wins in a power conference, and Colorado is one of those 10-2 teams. There's a lot of suit and ties in that boardroom, Drew Russell, and I like Colorado's chances if they're going up against some 9-3 SEC teams, some 9-3 Big 12, Big 10 teams, even some 10-2 like ACC teams. I like the Buffs to be in that conversation more than anybody else in the conference, mind you. Like, if Kansas State wins out and they're sitting at 10-2, I don't think that they're nearly as marketable to get into this, despite actually beating Colorado head to head. But that's where we are.
Yeah, it is interesting just based because the boardroom, you're right. And I think I said this last week. I think we both did, that they want eyeballs on their product. Colorado does draw eyeballs. We said that last week, and we'll continue to say that. They are an entertaining team. No question about it. I don't know what their route is, but it's not impossible. And I think the first, we're going to have our first revealing of the 12-team playoff on Tuesday, Brandon. Like, that's going to happen on ESPN, which I'm aware there might be bigger fish to fry that night nationally, but you and I will, I'll say I have some interest in seeing our first initial poll. I'm just curious what they'll do with the Big 12. I think right now they're going to have our auto bid, and it'll be interesting to see if we can get one more at large. For right now, I don't see it, but it doesn't mean we can't play our way into the conversation either.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that there's not going to be more than one Big 12 team in that 12-team playoff come Tuesday night. Probably the biggest reveal, like I said, throughout the country. Biggest news throughout Twitter, I'm sure. But it's also, we're still talking 3 games down the road. Like, there's going to be teams that stumble, and we just have to hope that our teams aren't the ones that stumble. Because how do you think that this would play out? So Oregon's number 1, I would imagine. They're undefeated. Another good, solid win over Michigan last on Saturday.
Yeah.
I guess Georgia, Ohio State at 2 and 3, however you want to order that. Georgia doesn't look very good, by the way. Like, Carson Beck is hilariously taking his draft stock, and it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it is.
And then you're probably looking at Miami. They're undefeated. And then it gets really interesting, because, like, what do you do with undefeated Indiana? What do you do with a 1-loss Penn State team that just lost to the number 2, 3 team in the country? Boy.
Yeah, the scenarios, and again, like, the 12-team playoff, I had my doubts, Brandon. Last year, I had my doubts. I thought, are we going to allow mediocrity to come in? This has been electric. The debates are amazing. Like, this is NCAA tournament style debates that we're going to be having in the coming weeks. And it's incredible. Like, I absolutely love the debates that we are having right now regarding that. So, I don't know. Like, I just, it'll be interesting to see how things play out going forward. But I'm just curious how they'll see these teams on Tuesday. I think everybody will be, because are they going to show that heavy favoritism as anticipated towards the SEC and Big 10, or will we sneak in an extra Big 12 team? Will we sneak in an extra ACC team? That remains to be seen.
Yeah, what do you do with Notre Dame 7-1 or 8-1 now, but with that obvious loss to Northern Illinois? What do you do now with a 2-loss Texas A&M team that was previously in the top 10 and were regarded as a playoff caliber team? What I mean, Boise State will likely lead the group of five race, but I mean, what do you do with? There's just a lot of, and this is how I feel like it usually is, and it usually settles things up pretty good. But can you imagine if it was still a 14 playoff, Drew Russell? How messy this would be. It feels like this is the perfect year to expand to 12.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of incredible, to be honest with you, Brandon. And I love that. Initially I thought, oh, I kind of hate you shouldn't have to go perfect throughout your season to get a chance to play for a national championship. I'm okay that you have a blemish now. I'm okay that you have a blemish or two on your resume, but doesn't matter, Brandon. There was so many complaints. I remember people were so excited about the 12-team playoff. They said, oh, now we won't have, like teams that are deserving to get in, they'll get in. The problem is now we've just casted a wider net. And now we've got this bigger net of like, these teams deserved, to get in. So I don't know, but it is pretty fun. I can't lie to you. In this November stretch, November, I always say, is the best time of year for football. College football is kind of at its finest in the regular season. NFL, I think you start to get playoff pictures put together and you're seeing some interesting narratives develop more and more. And this is a wild cycle right now in terms of college athletics.
And there was a point yesterday where Duke was beating up on Miami, and that would have been perfect scenario for the Big 12, because then you start to look at the ACC, because that's going to be I think the biggest conversation is I think, and of course this is all prefacing if BYU, Iowa State, and Colorado take care of business here the next 3 weeks. If they stumble a little bit more, none of this matters, right? But the ACC is really going to be the team where you're kind of having those comparable resumes, because I think you're going to have your obvious 2 or 3 teams up top: Ohio State, assuming they beat Indiana, Oregon, Georgia probably, or Texas, or whoever wins the SEC. But then I feel like you can squeeze in the top of the ACC and the Big 12 right in that conversation before you start to get to those 2 to potentially 3 loss SEC Big 10 teams, and that's where I think the Big 12 and the ACC are competing for spots. And if Miami could have eaten a loss, and then they maybe lose to Clemson in the ACC championship, that probably makes them a 1-bid league. But then they come back and win 53-31, so it wasn't even close. So maybe next week, but Miami's the team to watch if you're really pulling for a multi-bid Big 12 scenario like we are. And actually, as of right now, Clemson isn't even on pace to get to the ACC championship game anymore. Now that they have 2 losses.
Lost against Louisville. Yep, lost to Louisville last night. Yep.
Yeah, so if the season ended today, Miami and SMU are in the ACC championship game. And Miami.
How about that SMU?
How about them? Okay, did I see something like, did SMU jump on that lawsuit with Florida State and Clemson, or was that just a fever dream?
I didn't see that, but not impossible. At this point, nothing's
that would
impossible.
Be very fun. That's right.
That'd be pretty entertaining. I'll say that.
It's like, we're going to pay you $100 million to join your conference. You don't even have to pay us anything. And then fuck you. We're trying to get out of this conference. This is bullshit.
That kind of is the, because SMU is known as kind of a rich country club school, isn't it, Brandon? Down in area, or heavy money.
My uncle describes it, a lifelong Dallas resident, as the school where millionaires send their kids to meet billionaires.
I love it. That is a line, and then that's an extra line. I'm all in on that.
Excuse me. And it's so funny to me. Okay, maybe that was just a fever dream. I can't find anything here about SMU joining that lawsuit, but which would be crazy if they did. I was having some hallucinations last week, I guess. But it's so funny to me because like TCU and SMU is like this big rivalry down here, and like TCU's in Fort Worth, where it's more like your traditional Texan. They have the stockyards, the more of the rodeo, the rustic kind of feel. Then you have the big metropolitan and Dallas and SMU, and that's how those two schools view each other. But then when you kind of take a step back and look at how kind of fancy and snobby that TCU is, and now that's how the rest of the Big 12 looks at TCU, is how TCU looks at SMU. It's very funny, very funny optics. But SMU's got a path: Boston College, Virginia, and California to wrap up their slate. So they're going to be favored in their final 3 games. Miami's going to be favored in their final 3 games. Yeah, at that rate, you probably pull for Miami in the ACC championship. So now you don't have a 1-loss ACC team coming out of there. And then even with SMU, who's going to be in this conversation with 10 wins, 11 wins maybe, is that they lost to BYU at home.
True. Yeah.
So
that win. Who knew that game would play such a significant impact back?
Major playoff.
That was a week 3 game, and we both said, "Oh, that's a nice little win for BYU to go on the road." And now you look at it like that's a huge win for BYU in case they don't win. Let's say they go undefeated, Brandon, and don't win the conference championship, and SMU's trying to sneak in there, and they're in the same boat, they have to pick BYU over SMU. Have to. I mean, head-to-head, that's a clear as day decision. So who knew that would have such a major impact, just a few days ago?